At my brother's housewarming, he raised a glass and declared Grandpa left him the lake house, our childhood haven. My heart stopped. Grandpa had already given me the deed weeks ago, in secret. As Josh read his forged letter to cheers and applause, I quietly smiled. Let him have his moment. Because I came prepared with the truth. I could feel at the moment I walked into Josh's housewarming party, something was off. The living room buzzed with laughter and clinking glasses, the kind of casual chaos you'd expect when friends and family gather to celebrate a fresh start. But there was a tension under the surface, like the quiet hum before a thunderstorm. Josh stood in the center, drink in hand, grinning like he just won the lottery. He raised his glass high. I'd like to make a toast, he called out, silencing the room. To new beginnings, new homes, and to Grandpa's memory. A respectful hush fell over everyone. Our grandfather had passed just 4 days earlier. The grief still clung to the air like fog. I raised my glass too, whispering a quiet miss you in my heart. Grandpa was more than family. He was my anchor, my compass. Josh cleared his throat. Speaking of Grandpa, he said, placing his drink on the coffee table, I have an announcement. My stomach flipped. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a slightly worn envelope. My breath caught. Something about the smug glint in his eyes screamed, this isn't going to end well. Before he passed, Josh said, Grandpa gave me this letter. In it, he left me his vacation cabin. The room erupted into surprise. Cheers. Claps. My mother gasped. Dad actually looked proud. Josh's girlfriend squealed and hugged him. Only my cousin Jenna met my eyes from across the room, confusion and disbelief flickering in her expression. She knew how close Grandpa and I were. We both did. I forced a smile, nodding politely, though my mind screamed, what the hell is going on? That cabin, Grandpa's retreat by the lake, was sacred to me. I'd been there nearly every weekend the past few years, helping him with maintenance, sharing stories, soaking in silence. Josh hadn't stepped foot there in 5 years unless it was to throw a party. He hated the no Wi-Fi rule, called it a retirement home for dead trees. So why would Grandpa give it to him? Unless 3 weeks earlier, Grandpa had handed me a wooden box. His old cigar case, smooth with age and smelling faintly of cedar. Don't open it until you need to know the truth, he'd said, with that wise, knowing look of his. And suddenly, I needed to know. I excused myself, muttering something about the bathroom. Once inside, I locked the door, leaned back, and stared at my reflection. My heart pounded like a drumbeat. Josh's announcement didn't make sense. Not just emotionally, it didn't add up legally, either. I'd seen Grandpa's hands shake. But the signature on Josh's letter? Too perfect. Too smooth. My phone buzzed. A text from Jenna. You okay? That was weird. Josh never even cared about the cabin. I texted back, cover for me. I need to check something. Say I got called into work. Within minutes, I was out the back door. I had a box to open, and maybe, just maybe, a lie to expose. I didn't plan to sneak out of the housewarming party, but after what I'd just witnessed, I needed answers. Fast. Driving through the night, I replayed every moment I'd ever shared with Grandpa at the lake house. The porch swing talks. The way he'd teach me to patch a leaky boat roof. The quiet moments watching the stars. That cabin wasn't just a getaway, it was a cornerstone of my childhood. It was Grandpa. And the idea that Josh, who barely visited and complained about the lack of phone signal, had inherited it? It didn't sit right. Back at my apartment, I didn't even take off my shoes. I rushed to the closet, yanked down the cedar box Grandpa had given me 3 weeks ago, and set it on the coffee table. My heart thudded. This was it. This was what Grandpa meant when he said, "You'll know when it's time to open it." Inside, I found a notarized deed, officially transferring the cabin to me. Dated 6 months ago. And a letter, in Grandpa's famously shaky but unmistakable handwriting. It began with, "To my dearest Ellie." I froze. He still used that nickname from when I was a kid. Reading through it, tears burned my eyes. Grandpa hadn't just left me the cabin, he knew this moment might come. He expected it. He'd even filed a legal copy with his lawyer. Josh didn't inherit the cabin. He hijacked the moment. I texted Jenna, "It's mine. Official. Not part of the estate." She replied instantly, "Knew it." What now? I took a deep breath, typing back, going back. But not to make a scene. Grandpa wouldn't want that. No. I was going to do this my way, with proof, not noise. On the drive back, I rehearsed what I'd say. Not to shame Josh. Just to set the record straight. He'd tried to steal the spotlight. But I held the truth. And tonight, truth would speak louder than the toast. I drove straight home, barely noticing the lights flashing past. My thoughts were racing too fast for the world to keep up. As soon as I got in, I beelined to the hallway closet where I kept the wooden box Grandpa had given me just weeks ago. It was still there, untouched, its cedar scent faint but familiar, like Grandpa himself was guarding it. He had handed me this box with a knowing smile and just one instruction: don't open it until the moment feels right. That moment was now. Inside, I found a notarized deed, folded carefully in a plastic sleeve, already stamped and filed, transferring the cabin ownership to me. Not as part of the will, not with conditions. It was mine. Grandpa hadn't waited for the courts or lawyers. He had known the fight might come and wanted to leave no room for doubt. But what hit me even harder than the legal proof was the letter. Scrawled in his unmistakable, shaky handwriting, the kind arthritis couldn't hide. It read, "My dearest Emma. You've loved this cabin the way I always hoped someone in the family would. You understood it wasn't just walls and wood, it was soul. I've made the transfer official to avoid family disputes, but I suspect Josh may try something anyway. He always did crave the spotlight. Be kind, but be firm. You've earned this, sweetheart. Don't let anyone take it away." I had to sit down. Tears blurred my vision, not just from relief, but from grief. That kind of trust, that kind of love, it weighed heavy in the best way. Grandpa hadn't just passed down a home. He'd passed down responsibility. Legacy. And then something shifted inside me. I had the truth. But if Josh was out there spinning a lie to the whole family, I couldn't let it sit. I didn't want to fight. I didn't want to cause a scene. But silence wasn't an option anymore either. I packed the documents back into the box, grabbed my keys, and headed out. The housewarming was probably still going. And if Grandpa taught me anything, it's that the quiet truth always lands harder than the loudest performance. As I pulled up to Josh's house, the nerves hit me. Not because I was afraid, I had proof, but because I didn't want it to come to this. I didn't want to be the one who had to dismantle my brother's fantasy in front of everyone. But Grandpa's words echoed in my mind, "Be kind, but be firm." I stepped out of the car, cedar box in hand, and walked toward the door. Josh answered the door himself. His confident smirk faltered the moment he saw the box in my hands. He knew. He just didn't know how much I knew. "Emma," he said, stepping aside awkwardly. "Back from your emergency already?" I didn't respond. I walked into the living room, where the remaining family had gathered, our parents, our aunt and uncle, a few cousins. Josh's girlfriend, Lexi, was still there too, perched on the arm of the couch with a champagne flute. My mom looked up and smiled. "Josh just shared Grandpa's letter. Isn't it wonderful he left him the cabin?" I placed the wooden box gently on the coffee table and took a deep breath. "Actually, there's something important you all need to see." Josh stiffened. "Emma, don't do this." I ignored him. 3 weeks ago, Grandpa gave me this box. He told me not to open it until the time was right. Tonight made that time very clear. I opened the box slowly, like peeling back the cover on years of truth nobody had been ready to hear. First, I pulled out the notarized deed and placed it in front of my dad. Then, I unfolded Grandpa's handwritten letter. My father scanned the deed, his brow furrowing. This is dated 6 months ago. It's official, and it's not part of the estate. Exactly, I said, voice steady. Grandpa already gave me the cabin while he was alive. It was never up for discussion. A stunned silence spread through the room. Josh let out a bitter laugh. So you're just gonna steal my moment? That's low, even for you. I turned to him calmly. You fabricated a letter, Josh. Grandpa had already transferred the property to me, and you knew it. You just didn't think I'd have the courage to call you out. My mom reached for the letter Josh had read aloud earlier and laid it beside Grandpa's real letter. The difference was glaring. The handwriting on Josh's letter was far too smooth, the signature too perfect. You forged this, she whispered, horrified. Josh didn't answer. Lexi stood up abruptly. I need some air, she muttered, brushing past him as she headed for the door. Her silence said everything. You don't understand, Josh said finally, his voice cracking. You were always his favorite. You had all those weekends with him, all those memories. I wanted something. You wanted everything, I said quietly. But Grandpa already gave you something. You just didn't see it. Josh stared at the documents, the truth finally catching up with him. My father exhaled slowly, then looked at me. Thank you for bringing this forward, Emma. I'm sorry it had to happen like this. I nodded. The hardest part was over. The truth was out, and not in a scream, not in an argument, but in quiet, undeniable proof. Just like Grandpa would have wanted. Josh collapsed into the nearest armchair like the truth had knocked the wind out of him. He ran his hands through his hair and muttered, I didn't plan to read the letter tonight. It just came out. Came out? I echoed. You orchestrated an entire announcement, at your housewarming, with our whole family here. He flinched. I was angry. I found out last week that Grandpa had taken the cabin out of his estate. His lawyer wouldn't say more, but I figured it meant something. And then I saw your name on a file on his desk when he went to get coffee. I just assumed the worst. You assumed I'd hide it? I asked, hurt creeping into my tone. You thought I'd keep the cabin and say nothing? Josh didn't answer right away. His gaze was on the floor, his pride crumbling piece by piece. I thought if I claimed it first, maybe no one would question me. Maybe I could finally be part of something Grandpa valued. There it was. The real wound. For the first time, I saw past the arrogance. He wasn't trying to steal property, he was grasping for belonging. Our dad sat beside him, silent but listening, his eyes filled with disappointment and something gentler, concern. Josh, he said finally, you weren't excluded. Grandpa tried, more than once, to connect with you. You always said you were too busy, too bored, too uninterested. I didn't understand back then, Josh said, barely audible. Not what it meant to him, or to you, he added, glancing at me. I stepped over to the box again. There's more. Inside the lid, tucked in a flap, was a smaller envelope. I pulled it out and turned it over. Josh's name was scrawled across the front in Grandpa's unmistakable handwriting. Josh's eyes widened. He left me something? I didn't read it, I said. It wasn't addressed to me. He took the envelope with trembling hands, hesitating before opening it. His lips moved silently as he read, and as he reached the final lines, his shoulders shook. What did he say? Mom asked gently. Josh folded the letter and held it to his chest. He said he always believed I'd find my way. That the cabin wasn't meant for me, not because he didn't care, but because he wanted me to build something of my own. He left me a check, and a challenge. The room went still. What challenge? I asked. To use the money to do something that matters, Josh whispered. Something that means as much to me as the cabin meant to him. I felt my throat tighten. Grandpa hadn't just planned for inheritance, he had planned for healing. And now, maybe, we could begin. That night, I couldn't sleep. Josh's words echoed in my mind. He said he wanted me to build something that mattered. The cabin was silent, but it didn't feel empty. I sat on the porch swing wrapped in an old flannel blanket, staring out at the moonlight dancing on the lake's surface. This place had always grounded me, but now, it felt heavier, like Grandpa had passed a torch, and I was only beginning to grasp how brightly it burned. The next morning, Josh texted me. "Can I come by the cabin this weekend? I want to talk." "No drama, I promise." I stared at the message for a moment, then typed back. "Saturday. Bring coffee. You owe me that much." When he arrived, he looked different. Not in appearance, but in energy. The defensiveness was gone. He walked slowly toward the porch where I was fixing one of the support beams Grandpa had always meant to replace. "Need help?" he asked, holding up a tool set I hadn't expected him to bring. I handed him a wrench. "We'll see if you're useful." We worked in silence for an hour. Just like old times, except we never really had old times like this. For once, Josh didn't rush, didn't complain. And when we finally sat on the porch, sweat and sawdust clinging to our clothes, he spoke first. "I enrolled in that entrepreneurship course Grandpa always suggested," he said, cracking open his thermos. "The one I used to laugh at." I turned to him, surprised. "Really?" He nodded. "I figured if I couldn't inherit the cabin, maybe I could build something else worth keeping." It wasn't said with resentment. It was hopeful. Honest. "I'm not asking for your forgiveness," he continued. "But I want to earn back your trust. Maybe not today. Maybe not even next month. But eventually." That hit harder than I expected. Maybe because I knew how hard it was for Josh to admit fault. Maybe because I saw my brother again, not the performer, not the liar, but the kid who used to help me build blanket forts in the living room when our parents were out. I stood, walked inside, and came back with Grandpa's brag book, the one filled with clippings and memories he'd saved for each of us. I flipped it open to Josh's section and set it in his lap. "He was always watching," I said. "Even when you thought he wasn't." Josh's hands hovered over the photos, his debate trophy, his high school speech notes, a printout of an article he'd written for a tech blog. His eyes filled, but he didn't cry. He just whispered, "I thought he gave up on me." "No," I said, my voice steady. "He was just waiting for you to show up." We sat in silence again, the kind that doesn't press, just fills. The cabin had been given to me. But now, I saw it for what it truly was, not a reward, not a prize, but a bridge. And Josh was finally ready to cross it. Weeks passed, and the air at the cabin grew a little lighter with each visit. Josh came by more often, sometimes to help fix things, sometimes just to sit on the porch and watch the sun go down. We didn't talk about the forgery again. Not directly. We didn't need to. Trust, once broken, doesn't come back in a single apology, it's rebuilt, quietly, plank by plank. One Saturday afternoon, I found him sanding down one of the old canoe paddles Grandpa had carved decades ago. "I was thinking," he said, not looking up, "maybe we hang this in the main room. As a reminder. Of the things that matter." I nodded. "Like not forging legal documents?" He chuckled, sheepish. "Yeah, that too." We fell into a rhythm. Josh began to see the cabin the way I did, not as property, but as legacy. A place built not of wood and stone, but of quiet conversations, laughter over burnt marshmallows, and the silent love between generations. One night, as we sat by the fire pit, he handed me a folded sheet of paper. "I've been writing something. Not for social media or show. Just for me. Or maybe, for him." I opened it slowly. It was a letter. To Grandpa. A confession. An apology. A promise. "I didn't think I'd cry writing it," he muttered, looking into the fire. But I did. A lot. I looked up from the letter. I think he'd have cried reading it. He didn't respond. He didn't have to. The next weekend, we drove up to the Ridge Trail, the spot Grandpa always said was his favorite view on Earth. Josh brought the letter. We buried it under a cairn of stones, just the two of us, with pine needles crunching under our boots and the wind whistling through the trees. "Goodbye, Grandpa," Josh whispered. "Thank you for not giving up on us." Back at the cabin, I unlocked the roll-top desk and placed the brag book beside Grandpa's old fishing journal. Some stories need to be preserved. Others need to be continued. Months later, the cabin hosted its first real family gathering since Grandpa's passing. Our parents came. Jenna brought her kids. Even Teresa stopped by, this time with her new fiancé. The air buzzed with memories, but also something new, healing. As the evening drew to a close, Josh stood by the dock, looking out over the lake. I joined him, handing him a cold drink. "Think he'd be proud?" he asked. I didn't hesitate. I know he would. Because the cabin wasn't just standing, it was alive again. And we were finally learning how to share it.